Joni's been doing very good. Indeed. Remember to go. But when he prays with me at night, it just makes me feel more secure. Joni Lamb's announcement was not expected by anyone, not even her closest supporters. Her comments were stunning, raw, and sufficient to stop people in their tracks. Stunned, and stunned was the audience's reaction. Was it a confession, a warning, or the ultimate truth? Whatever it was, the consequences are already being felt in the Christian community. Never think that the story is over. This changes everything. There we are again. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing content. And hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Now, back to the topic. What we were talking about was, this changes everything. It started out pretty much like any other DayStar telecast. The cameras were rolling, the studio lights were warm, and Joni Lamb was sitting in her usual spot, smiling, composed, and self-assured. For years, she had been the dependable face of faith for millions of people. But this time it felt different. Her voice was steady. Yes. But something was odd in her gaze. You could see it if you looked closely enough. That's when they looked tired and heavy, she said. Whatever it was, no one was ready for it. At first, many thought they had misheard her. Maybe she was metaphorically speaking. Maybe the statement was just weird. But no. As the video played over and again on the internet, it became clear. She was sincere in her speech. It took only a few minutes for social media to take off. Screenshots, replies, and group discussions at church were all about it. What did Joni just say? For what reason did she say that? And what did it actually mean? It wasn't a technical glitch or an awkward word. This was planned. Her tone, her timing, everything seemed planned. But everyone was caught off guard by her delivery. Joni didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She looked directly into the camera and spoke as though she had nothing left to lose. People couldn't believe it. Some called it heroism, while others called it treason. Either way, the shock was immediate and severe. Viewers noticed the personnel behind her shifting uncomfortably, a producer's eyes blazing, a host's fingers shaking. Something was amiss, and the silence in the room drowned out her words. Longtime fans felt ill to their stomachs about it. Someone or something valuable shook. There was a breaking sound. This was not merely a news item. It was a turning point. Joni Lamb was the object of suspicion and speculation after decades of being a symbol of faith, family, and truth. Her remarks left more than just people confused. It was as though the person they had trusted for so long had suddenly taken off their mask, leaving them feeling betrayed and hurt. Some supported her, claiming that maybe she was finally telling the truth. Others thought they had been duped for years. But there was no denying that trust had been betrayed. Moreover, when confidence is absent, there is no sound. For years, it produces a reverberating silently the horrific broadcast. People waited. First with curiosity, then with confusion, and lastly with irritation. For many years, Joni had been a direct speaker who responded quickly to challenging circumstances. But now, when the world needed answers, she said nothing. Completely quiet. More joyful images and carefully selected Bible verses were posted on DayStar's social media platforms, but there was little explanation or follow-up. But damage had already been done. Because of this quiet, rumors were able to proliferate. They don't just grow, they spread like wildfire. The same question began to be asked in churches, prayer groups, and online forums. In reality, what was going on in the background? For the first time in years, Joni was no longer quoted by fans. She was being questioned by them. And when the silence stretched on, small cracks became abysses. In silence, ministries that had previously worked with DayStar began to pull away. Absence, without broadcasts of farewell or public declarations. The names that had previously made the network's headlines suddenly disappeared from the roster. Some churches ceased mentioning them altogether, even some that had worked closely with the Lamb family. Many around Joni started to see things they could no longer ignore, despite the fact that she stayed silent. Former staff members, guests, and even volunteers who once felt honored to be a part of the DayStar team whispered. Some of those mutterings turned into anonymous texts. Others became contentious debates. They were all in the same tone. Something had changed. There was talk of friction on set, decisions taken without consultation, and Joni becoming more and more alone with people who only told her what she wanted to hear. One volunteer said that when Marcus passed away, everything was different. It used to feel like family when they shared it, but now it feels like cold business. Others talked about the wasting of money on irrational purchases. Expensive trips, expensive clothes, and elite parties that no one really understood. Some even claimed that they were dismissed for raising questions. Simply disappeared, with no conversation or explanation. That was not the end of the story. People began rewatching earlier programs to look for clues as to whether the indicators had always been there. In fact, there were those who said they were. They noted changes in Joni's tone, posture, and the way she routinely sidestepped some interview subjects. And Marcus seemed uneasy sometimes, too. But at the time, no one ventured to question it. Now those moments looked different. And in the middle of all this silence and speculation, one name kept coming up. Rachel Lamb Brown is Joni's daughter. At first, her presence seemed natural. Just a daughter supporting her sad mother. But as time went on, Rachel began to take on more responsibility. She wasn't just filling in anymore. People saw her reaching out to powerful pastors, leading, phoning, and hosting. Some people thought it was a power grab. Some believed it had always been prearranged. In any event, Rachel's rise exacerbated tensions between DayStar employees and viewers. Longtime supporters of the ministry were split. Some wanted to believe that Joni was still leading and in control. Others started to see Rachel as the new spokeswoman for the network. That disconnect simply added to the feeling of dread. The fact that the split extended beyond the ordinary populace is its most terrible feature. That was the family. Behind the scenes, Joni's relationship with her son Jonathan soured. Very tense. Ever since Marcus's death, Jonathan had quietly retreated. His wife, Susie, stopped appearing on television. They didn't create any noise. They didn't post anything noteworthy. They just disappeared. And when people were asked where they were, there was just silence. Later, more pieces came to light. Jimmy Evans, who is well liked by the Lambs and DayStar watchers alike, raised his voice. He described the discomfort of being asked to mediate a conversation that seemed to be more about control than healing. According to Jimmy, Joni wanted her son to completely obey her. Not only as a son, but as if she were speaking for God himself. That startled people. Even those who had previously defended Joni sat silently after hearing it. Jonathan and Susie weren't rebelling. They were not going to take charge. They were just trying to ask questions, express their opinions, and protect their child from something they thought was dangerous. They retaliated by being driven away. As more of these details became available, the difference widened even more. Not just among viewers, but also among ministries, church leaders, and even Lamb family members. It was more than just a betrayal of confidence. It was torn. People no longer know whom to believe. Joni's silence proved to be more damaging than any gossip since people began forming their own rumors in the absence of answers. And when Joni admitted in the podcast interview that there were others around Marcus who weren't looking out for him, the mayhem broke out. Was she finally telling the truth? Or was she shifting the blame in an attempt to alter the past before it caught up with her? That one comment, which was only a few lines long, rekindled wounds that had never fully healed. Fans who had previously thought they had moved on expressed further worries, and those questions led to more rumors, which further polarized the group. Some claimed that Joni was trying to protect her family. Some believed she was trying to protect herself. But for others, there was no doubt that the truth had not yet come to light. But everyone agreed on this. DayStar was different. There was no warmth left. It was fake enthusiasm. In addition, the prevailing silence just made people feel more isolated. The internet was no longer the exclusive source of the divide. They included homes and churches, as well as families who had been watching DayStar together for decades. There were many who waited for Joni to go on. Others quietly unfollowed, unsubscribed, and departed. At the heart of it all was Joni Lamb. Silent and unreadable, still in the middle of a maelstrom she used to control but could no longer halt. The interview was not supposed to be a big deal. In fact, most people almost missed it. It was not carried by DayStar. Millions of people missed the live event. It was not broadcast on any major Christian network. A small podcast with maybe a few thousand devoted listeners was run by a pastor and his wife. A calm area of the internet where individuals talked about healing, faith, and personal journeys. And that's precisely why no one saw what was coming. Nothing noteworthy came from Joni Lamb's group. There were no promotional videos, teaser posts, or countdowns. She just showed up. Additionally, the episode was hardly audible until listeners heard what she had to say. Suddenly the whisper became to a shout. At first, Joni was calm. She smiled, nodded politely, and answered the host's opening questions as though she had been asked 100 times before. She gave talks about faith, loss, and the mourning process when Marcus passed away. About halfway through the interview, though, her tone shifted. Her eyes darkened. She stopped talking. She leaned in a little. And her words rendered many unable to speak. There were people around Marcus who weren't looking out for him, she said quietly. The listeners and hosts froze, and the Christian world held its breath. With just one sentence, Joni had unlocked a door that had been closed for years, and I didn't see it until it was too late. For so long, the story had been simple. When Marcus unexpectedly died of COVID complications, Joni carried on the ministry with dignity and fortitude. That was the story, tidy and well-managed. But now Joni was hinting at something darker, something that hinted at betrayal, from inside, not outside enemies. The internet took off. People listened to that part of the interview over and over again, paying close attention to every word, every pause, and every breath she took. Was there someone to blame for her? Was she protecting herself? Was she finally telling the truth, or was she just being a diversion? There was a rush of conjecture. Some said she was talking about her own staff. DayStar executives who might have misused their power. Some wondered if she was talking about her own daughter, Rachel, who had become well-known after Marcus' death. Others said it was related to Joni's marriage to Doug Weiss soon after she became a widow. There were other theories. The comments were ablaze. Those who hadn't watched DayStar in years were re-engaged by the clip. A large number of those who had stayed faithful were suddenly uncertain about their beliefs. But the interview went on. Joni remarked, "I thought I understood the people around me, but grief reveals a lot, and sometimes you realize the person standing next to you wasn't standing with you at all," following the startling discovery. She never mentioned names. She never gave details, but she didn't have to. The damage was already done. The public image of Joni Lamb. The strong widow, the loyal leader, the woman who carried on her husband's legacy, began to lose credibility. And it wasn't just Joni who was impacted. It affected the entire ministry. If Marcus had been surrounded by the wrong people, how far would it have gone? Was there anyone else who knew? And who helped to hide it? And why was Joni speaking now? Behind the scenes, mayhem ensued. Leaders who had worked with DayStar before secretly reached out to one another to ask if they had heard the interview. Some responded with concern. Others were furious. Some of them immediately began to pull away. Churches began to leave the network in secret. Guest speaker appearances were postponed. DayStar social media profiles that were previously active ceased to post. Inside the DayStar offices, things got tense. Workers were told to keep quiet. Rumors of emergency meetings started to spread online. Some employees left without saying goodbye. Others were still there, but their grins dimmed. The mood had changed. Additionally, they noted that Rachel was on camera less frequently. When she did, she seemed more serious, less polished, and less assured, as though she knew something was off but didn't know how to stop it. Even Doug Weiss, who had previously frequently appeared in Joni's postings and appearances, began to fade. Some wondered if the marriage was already in trouble. Others asserted that he was safe. No one knew for sure, but there were certainly plenty asking questions. Along with the interview's excellent content, the delivery style was also excellent. Joni didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pretend to be the victim. She simply talked as though she had finally decided to stop pretending, as though she had been keeping something from everyone for too long and now couldn't keep it to herself. That might have been the primary cause of the worry. Because if Joni was expressing the truth now, she had previously been hiding it. If she had hidden that, what else had she hidden? Narratives started to emerge. Reanalyzed old video, anonymous emails, former workers, and more questions with fewer and fewer solutions. Why did Marcus die so suddenly? For what reason was the funeral rushed? What caused Joni to remarry so quickly and to a man with a controversial past? Why did trustworthy workers leave after asking questions? Why did so many pastors step aside without giving a reason? After years of silence, Joni was finally speaking, but she was only giving part of the truth. Since everything changed after the interview, no one called it pointless, some called it courage, while some called it manipulation. The podcast episode was taken down 2 days later. Simply disappeared, no warning, no reason. The host said nothing. Joni never mentioned it again, but by that time it had become irrelevant. Already, the movie has been downloaded, shared, reposted, and copied. Once the words were out, they could not be taken back. And maybe, just maybe, that was the idea. It's possible that Joni knew what she was doing. Maybe she needed to speak while she was still able. Or maybe she was trying to avoid taking the blame before someone else did. Regardless of why she did it, the result was clear. DayStar would undergo a significant transformation. Neither would Joni. The planned calm, short interview proved to be the pivotal moment in the whole situation. Whispers turned into shouts at that point. The incident that led to inappropriate questions being asked by others. For those who kept watching, listening, and hoping for insight, one thing was certain. The story did not end there. Not even close. In the past, DayStar stood for strength, hope, and family values. For many Christian viewers around the world, it was more than just a TV network. It was a place of worship. They turned it on during the quiet moments before bed, while folding clothes, or at breakfast. Joni Lamb was the focal point of something familiar, trustworthy, and comforting. She always conveys her point with poise, elegance, and a grin. But recently, something has changed. Not everything occurred at once. Not a single instance of controversy or sudden collapse occurred. No, it happened slowly, like a slow leak, and for a while, most people didn't realize it. The shows began to change. There were some voices missing. Regular portions disappeared for no apparent reason. Longtime viewers of the Lamb family started to notice something was off after decades of viewing. They couldn't say exactly what it was, but it was more than the programming. It was the energy, the passion, the sense of unity. At one point, DayStar appeared to be a thriving community. Now it was hollow. Behind the scenes, there were rumors. Workers who formerly had called DayStar their mission field were quietly leaving. The people who had been there through thick and thin suddenly vanished. They never announced their departures. Quietly, the interns conversed. The volunteers were told not to ask questions, and when a few brave employees did try to get clarity, they were either told to remain silent and trust in God or were given vague responses. And the money was there. DayStar has never shied away from telethons, donations, fundraisers, and love gifts as part of the concept, but viewers started to notice strange things. The ministries they had long backed were no longer mentioned. Projects that had been announced with much fanfare were quietly shelved. The planned expansion was never constructed. Throughout it all, Joni remained calm yet distant. Her appearances were brief, and her lectures were less personal. It was as if she were talking through a glass wall. Existing, but not available. Despite the fact that nobody inside would publicly comment, rumors began to spread. People started to say that Joni was no longer really in charge, that Rachel Lamb Brown had taken over, that decisions were being made more for show than for ministry, that after her controversial marriage to Doug Weiss, Joni's priorities had completely changed, and that underneath all the carefully crafted Bible passages and social media posts, something was amiss. But in spite of all the questions, no conclusive answers were ever given. Not about Marcus's death, not about the rushed wedding, nor about the argument with Jonathan and Susie, not about the reason Jimmy Evans and other reliable individuals had discreetly left. And that silence and that incapacity to face what everyone could sense only served to deepen the divide. Longtime supporters felt duped. Churches stopped airing DayStar content. Some pastors, who had once praised Joni's strength, now admitted in private that they had forgotten who she was. And people started turning off the channel because they were heartbroken, not because they were angry. Since many of them had relied on DayStar for support, they trusted the company with their time, money, and even their prayers. Recently, it looked as though that trust had been taken for granted. The ministry they loved appeared to have changed into a well-manicured, tightly controlled brand that was far different from what it really was. Joni said nothing. Nothing changed, regardless of how hostile social media got, how YouTube videos and blogs scrutinized every move she made, or how the mysterious anonymous letter warning of the riddle surrounding Marcus' final months and listing former co-workers went viral in Christian circles. No press conference, no public statement, no overt denial, just silence and joyful photos. The most agonizing part was probably the stillness. Because when people are hurting, confused, mourning, or in dire need of understanding, they don't require perfection. They demand honesty. Additionally, it seemed as though Joni, the woman who formerly stood in the gap and spoke for openness, solidarity, and truth, was concealed behind a wall of meticulously edited updates and well-preserved appearances. The truth is that no one knows what really happened. What caused Marcus's sudden death? What caused the family to split up so quickly? For what reason did revered speakers remain silent? Why a network based on faith is now tainted by cynicism? Even after everything has been made public, the uncomfortable interview, the emotional family get-together, the silent resignations, something still seems to be being kept secret. It is said that Joni is protecting someone. Some others think she's protecting herself. But as time passes, it becomes more noticeable. The ministry is failing, yet the fact remains hidden. Behind those dazzling lights, things are different, even though the cameras and broadcasts are still in operation. Perhaps trust will never be restored since it is hard to reclaim after it has been lost. When secrets begin to surface, people begin to wonder what more has been hidden. And if the silence overwhelms the message, even the most committed hearts begin to wander. Now, people must wait. They wait for answers that may never come. They await the truth, which may never come to light. They wait for Joni to finally speak, the real woman behind the smile, not the polished public image. But till then, DayStar is still dim. Moreover, many people no longer find it to be a source of hope. It acts as a depressing reminder of what happens when power takes precedence above integrity. When a ministry prioritizes appearances over accountability and fails to recognize that true faith begins with truth, which is still hidden in the shadows. If you enjoyed this video, please click the notification bell, like, and subscribe to stay up to date on the latest developments in this ongoing story. Kindly leave your remarks in the space provided below.